Tonight at 10, a Connecticut man seen on video taking part in the January 6th riots at the U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C. Now tonight, for the very first time, the videos used here in this case have been made public, and we're seeing the man, Patrick Edward McCaughey III, up against officers at the Capitol for the first time. Patrick Edward McCaughey III from Ridgefield caught on video standing on the front lines of the mob that was attempting to breach the U.S. Capitol. McCaughey pushing up against officers' shields, yelling at them to go home. At one point, he and the rioters pushing on Officer Daniel Hodges, who was caught in between a door frame. McCaughey then leans down to the ground and picks up an officer's shield and hands it back to one of the people in the mob. Moments later, while still on the front lines, McCaughey picked up one of those shields and started striking toward Officer Hodges. A portion of the newly released video shows McCaughey speaking, saying that he's not doing anything wrong. I'm not doing anything. While the mob attempts to continue breaching the U.S. Capitol. McCaughey was located and arrested in South Salem, New York on January 19th, less than 2 weeks after the riots. Another portion of the video shows McCaughey exiting the Capitol, seemingly affected by many of the chemicals sprayed by protesters at Capitol and D.C. officers. McCaughey's being charged in a 26-count indictment along with 4 other individuals. He himself facing 9 counts, including assaulting a federal officer with a dangerous weapon and also engaging in physical violence in a restricted building with a dangerous weapon as well. McCaughey did plead not guilty. If convicted, he could face decades in prison.
Well,